Welcome back to Trekking Through Trek. Today we're talking about Star Trek, the original series, Season 2. We'll continue with the original series and talking about each of its episodes as the series continues to wonder if it'll continue to exist. As we go through this season, we will go from 67 to the middle of 68, and ultimately the exact state of where the original series will be will shift throughout its production. Now, as we've begun, the sets are immediately better. They look immediately better, they feel immediately better, and things bumped up in budget, right? Desolate thought that this was very successful, and they decided to continue it. Now, mind you, we are still in the era of the sci-fi still isn't fully respected. Hell, God knows even till today, it isn't. That's something I'll say so many times through various videos that I make, but this was just not that time period. So due to that, lots of producers still were not 100% on whether or not Star Trek was ready to even continue what they assumed was wasting their money. Season 2 was given a bigger budget, thankfully, and you can very much notice it, but towards the production, Desolate will ultimately be sold/merge with Gulf Western, and the executives there had signed off on the continued production of Season 2 because they were already contractually obliged to. Same went for the eventual merger with Paramount. We begin this season with Desolate and end it with Paramount, the people that have essentially fully owned most of it, kind of, till today. Now, that later complicated bit of who exactly owns what will be a problem later, but NBC has the TV rights to show it whenever they really want, and Paramount can make whatever else they want. Either way, Star Trek is now under Paramount, and we will continue that series essentially all the way till up today, that exact way. Due to this, Paramount will be incredibly unsure if it even wants to continue Star Trek at all. Paramount will essentially never really fully know if it wants to ever bring back Star Trek until it becomes very clear that they should, whether it be through merchandise sales or for later reasons we'll get to when we get to the movies. But at least, hey, full steam ahead for we can make some really good shit, hopefully, for Season 2. So let's see if Season 2 is as, sure, that was pretty alright, as a season as Season 1 was. As we did with Season 1 and will do for Season 3 of the original series, we're doing the episodes in such a weird order due to looking at we vaguely cared about what number that we're kind of saying in the opening of the episode, the star date, just kind of going from earliest star date to latest star date. Though due to certain star dates in this season being unknown, we kind of place certain episodes wherever I felt like, so there you go. So this season will thankfully end with what was the season finale, which I would have had it this way regardless due to what it is, and we'll get to it when we get to it. But I'll note that as before, and you can essentially say the same thing for the next season and even the animated series, but in general, besides certain mentions of the Organian treaty that happened in the previous season, and then the bringing back up of the whole rotating around the sun thing later on, which are such throwaway lines that if you don't know what they are, they really don't matter. So continuity in TOS doesn't really matter unless your name is Harcourt Fenton Mudd. I'd say somehow the animated series being after the original series is the only time where the adventure of these characters kind of makes sense in terms of an actual order, but we'll get to why that also ended up not making as much sense with that either. So you really can watch any TOS episode in any order you want, because it's not like all of your supporting cast are in every episode anyway, so you can't be like, well, Chekhov isn't in this episode, but it's like Sulu's not through most of this season because he's off filming a movie called Green Berets, so there's a stretch of episodes just don't have him, so he'll barely be in Season 2. But let's go ahead and get started with our very first episode, Catspaw. Catspaw is in the early stardate, and oddly it takes place even before the events of the Menagerie. It's like in the middle of Season 1, so it's weird that we're talking about this in Season 2, right? It's almost like stardates are weird. Zulu, Scotty, and a red, though yellow shirt guy haven't answered their call in a bit, so ultimately they're a little bit concerned when only one person is beamed back up, the red shirt, who of course dies. This season is really where the red shirt idea comes from, the idea that if you're in the TOS era and you wear the red shirt and you're not one of the main guys with the landing party, you're probably gonna die. That was already a thing in the previous season, of course. Just note this is the death counter so far of all of the red shirts, but that'll grow. This is the second season's one. You know, not a good time being on the TOS Enterprise if you aren't one of the main cast. Hell, probably even if you are the main cast. Now, of course, our main three are transported down. due to the fact that Scotty is also missing the assistant chief engineer, Desal, who oddly did appear in 2 previous episodes, one of which, again, technically takes place after this, so sure. But it's weird to see him here. He was supposed to continue to appear as the assistant chief engineer, but, like, they didn't have too much of the engineering set. Again, new set and all, which they'd never use ever, so they never really found a way to write him in, but presumably he is around during this time, and if our main 3 and Scotty and Sulu aren't there, then he's probably in charge. So he's just kind of on the ship, kind of telling Chekhov what to do throughout that time, and sure, I guess, well, our main cast goes down and finds a big spooky castle. Big spooky castle ends up having spooky old man and sexy lady. Korob and Sylvia, who are apparently magic, have captured the Enterprise, and they're just like dangling it there. The Enterprise are still around, but they're just like dealing with that. They talk about the old ones and that they were sent there, but eventually Korob realizes that Sylvia is fucking mad. So after letting them seemingly leave their dungeon they were sent to, Sylvia turns into a big-ass cat and tries to kill them. Mostly Kirk, who she really, really, really wanted to bang, which, considering it's Kirk, every woman in the galaxy wants to bang him. It's entirely understandable. Throughout that, they figure out that their power actually comes from this weird mystical orb, which Kirk is able to trick her into not guarding enough so that they could smash it, revealing their real forms. None of that had happened. They're not some kind of, like, magical godlike race, which you see so many times in Star Trek. No, they're weird little creatures, and more than likely, at least according to Star Trek Online, they are the old ones. That's the name of their species, and they're stupid little caterpillar creatures that have orbs that let them, like, have illusions so that you think that they're magic. Writer Robert Bloch based this episode very loosely on his own short story, Broomstick Ride. He also wrote What Are Little Girls Made Of? Both episodes, the old ones are referenced. Are these little guys the species that were no longer on the android planet from that episode? Maybe. But more importantly, Chekhov's here. This is the first appearance of Chekhov. Isn't that awesome? Walter Koenig joined this cast during this time that they kind of needed because they kept just having like an extra there. And you're like, you know what? We have more of a budget and we keep having characters that we want to bring back not return. So we're going to hire this guy. And thank God they do. A few episodes he'll appear and you'll have a bad wig because his hair was a little bit too short for them, but eventually he'll grow it so it's a little bit like that wig. But just note that if he looks a little bit stupid sometimes, that's because he's wearing that goofy ass wig. Catspaw a fun one. It's not one of my favorites. I really do just like the creatures at the ending, and if you don't want to watch every single Star Trek episode, but you want to like watch a majority of them, Catspaw is one you could probably skip, but it's one that certainly isn't bad in any way. It's alright, it's fun. Next up is Gamesters of the Triskelion. It takes place before Errand of Mercy and Operation Annihilate, so a little bit in later season 1. Kirk, Uhura, and Chekhov are kidnapped by a mysterious bald figure. He introduces himself as Galt, the master thrall of the planet Triskelion. I will continue to say this wrong, but that's fine, it's a fictional planet. They're taken to a dungeon and cuffed to the walls, given magnetic shock collars just in case they decide to do anything. The providers, their leaders of the planet, want them to fight for them for their amusement. McCoy and Spock are very concerned that these guys are lost, and they kind of argue for most of the episode of what they're going to do. And man, I don't like when my parents fight. The kidnapped 3 meet the other thralls. We get Lady, who really wants to bang Kirk, understandable, and other Lady, who really wants to bang Chekhov. Chekhov is a little bit of a prude. She seems like a nice lady. They're trained, and Uhura doesn't want to train at all, and she's nearly whipped because of it, but Kirk decides to take the beating, which I think is a pretty great scene. It really shows you how good of a captain he is, and that he'll, actively take what is given to the rest of his crewmen. Like, he wants to be the person who tries to stop them from being harmed, as, much as he fails at doing that. The providers do bid on them and kind of separate them. Spock and McCoy finally get to them, but Kirk is able to stop them from being murdered after he basically is like, show me yourselves! He hopes that they're gonna be like robots or computers because he's apparently very good at making them explode, but he finds out that they're like brains in jars or rocks. They're apparently brains, but they look like rocks. He tricks them into playing some kind of game to defeat them at their own ways, and if he wins, that they'll let all the slaves free. And Kirk just kind of is really easily able to beat the other guy, and now allows the rest of them to live on that planet on their own. Supposedly all these guys stay on there, even though all of them were clearly taken from somewhere else. But all of them clearly have, like, an actual species to go to. There's at least an Andoran, and I'm pretty sure Galt is those, like, melon-headed guys from Enterprise. I don't know why I think that, I just think that makes sense to me. This one's fun. I like the weird high sci-fi of it all, right? It's got a lot of strange alien boys in it, and that's what I really like to see. I prefer when they really go all out in terms of making how it's like weird and alien some of these like extra characters that we bring into the show can look, and like rather than to just be humans on a different planet, maybe with something on their forehead, you know? I prefer when they're like a whole different skin color and they got something on their fucking heads or something, you know? Even if it does look a little bit stupid, it at least can be fun, right? That's what I prefer to see from Star Trek. So Gamesters, it's fun. Side note, one of the providers is voiced by the tape recorder voice from the original Mission Impossible show. As it turns out, Mission Impossible was being filmed at the same time, and several of the actors and people working on that show would just visit the set sometimes. We could have had like a whole crossover if it weren't for, you know, the legality of it all. Next up is Metamorphosis. Metamorphosis' stardate apparently takes place in between Gamesters of Tricycle Days. Pretty sure Kirk was just kind of wrong about the stardates during that time, especially because towards the ending, he just goes, stardate unknown. So I don't think he actually knew. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are now once again the main three in an adventure. They are once again on the ship that should have basically exploded last time we saw it, but here it is once again. The Galileo does crash again when of course, it is taken down by a big old space fart while they are carrying Commissioner Nancy Hedford back to the Enterprise in order for the Federation to hopefully prevent a war on another planet. They're carrying her because she has a very particular space disease which needs treatment immediately or she'll die. Just note it is a rare life-threatening illness, not some kind of like terminal illness. So just note that she can be cured of this. The space fart does have them fall down, and the Galileo 3 soon find who else is living on that planet alongside the triangular space fart. It's Zefram Cochrane. Zefram Cochrane, who is a person who doesn't actually exist, but is important in universe for being the guy that finds warp flight. Even all the way back here, for those who enjoy TNG and its movies, Zefram Cochrane was introduced in TOS first. He's wearing his jammies and some kind of weird pin of which I have no idea what it is. Are those supposed to be like warp nacelles? Why are they placed like that? Zefram Cochrane calls the triangular space fart the Companion, and they have this thing going on, I guess. The Companion clearly has some kind of feelings for Zefram Cochrane, and eventually we figure out that it just kind of brought them here so that Zefram would stop feeling bad about basically not being with anybody. Towards the end, though, they figure out that they need to find a way to, you know, leave, so they begin making a plan on how to trick the Companion, but eventually, after that doesn't work, the Companion decides, you know what, I'm gonna merge with this lady, and now we're gonna be one singular person, metamorphizing into one new being, of which, hey, the lady who was dying is apparently perfectly fine with this. I don't believe it, but sure, whatever. They are then allowed to go, and Zefram basically goes, make sure you don't tell anybody, of which Kirk probably eventually does. They don't give like an actual good explanation on what the hell they told the, like, anyone after that. Presumably she had family and like people that were waiting for her. They needed her to stop a war. Did that war happen because she wasn't there? What did they tell the Federation? It's so unclear. What a bad ending, right? That lady was dead because of what this thing caused, and it goes, but she's fine with it. Like, what? I don't believe you. You're a creature. There's no follow-up to this, and there's no explanation of what happens next, and not everything needs an actual explanation, you know, in this kind of series, but like, damn, man, this thing needed one. What are they gonna do now? If anything needed that court-martial scene from Court-Martial, it was, you know, letting a fucking ambassador die. Considering there's other things that Kirk is told to keep secret but eventually tells people anyway, it's clear that this eventually is found out. And there are books that later show that Zefram lived a very nice short life after this and is definitely gone by the point of next gen. It's just weird that Zefram Cochrane, who was thought to have died a few years before TOS, is not only somehow still alive, but had been alive for a while on this planet and had a weird relationship with a weird space triangle part. This episode's really stupid and I don't like it. What the hell was the point of this? It's an interesting episode and an important one because it introduces this oddly in-universe important character who will later appear via different, better actor later. But like, what the hell? What a stupid fucking episode. Boring looking set, boring storyline. nonsensical ending. Amok Time, the first episode for the season, both in terms of production and airing, is one of my favorites. Spock introduces the Ponfar here. He wants to keep it very secret as he starts getting angry. It's due to the fact that it's a thing that he doesn't really want to share, and it's just sort of a thing that Vulcans don't share all that much. So nobody really knows the fact that Vulcans get horny angry. Vulcans, who of course keep their emotions down, are incapable when their blood starts to boil and they get super horny and also murderous. So they now have to either have sex or kill something. Maybe both. Spock asks to go to Vulcan, and at first Kirk is like, sure, if you tell me why. And Spock's like, I can't do that. Please put me to Vulcan. And he's like, oh, I can when you tell me why. Ultimately, he finds out about what the Ponfar is and why Vulcans have it and why there's a whole thing set up there. So, of course, both Kirk and McCoy are able to follow him down to Vulcan as he goes to this big thing, which the Vulcans have to have all set up. A whole bunch of chimes and bells and everyone watching. Do they watch while they do it? They do watch while they apparently have to do this whole ritual while they like bang on some pans and stuff. He's supposed to do it with T'Pring, a girl who he of course has been married to for a long time. The episode makes it believe that he hasn't seen T'Pring in years, but later Strange New Worlds will totally shift that. Regardless, T'Pring is uninterested in Spock due to the fact that Spock, was never really ever interested in T'Pring. Once again, Strange New Worlds really tries to add to that reasoning in that they sure tried to give it like a genuine try, but it just didn't work out. So T'Pring is a lot more justified in going, actually, I don't want you. I want your friend over here. So T'Pring is entirely justified when she goes, actually, I don't want you and have it for a while. I just couldn't contact you because you never answered your phone. So I'm going to bang this other guy here. But he's not going to be the person I'm going to have choose to fight you to the death. It's going to be your own friend. Part I think is going a little bit too far, but it sure does result in an incredibly fun action scene with an amazing soundtrack.
This is like when Spock had to fight Kirk on Star Trek. Best friends forced to do battle.
They fight multiple rounds. We see that Vulcan totally has weapons and has had weapons for a long time, mostly for hunting, but it does show you that there was a big culture of crazy murder men a long time ago, and now they all really just use it for rituals and stuff. Some of which do look the way just regular Romulan helmets looked. I'm not going to point out every reusing of costumes, but I do find it funny that in universe the same helmets that a regular Romulan soldier uses is the same one that a Vulcan uses for their weird sex ritual. Take that as you will. Spock does fully believe that he did kill Kirk, but it turns out McCoy just kind of gave him a little drug to knock him out. We get a nice little moment of Spock being very happy that he didn't kill Kirk, showing that Spock is a lot more in tune with his human side than you initially thought. The very first episode to feature any Vulcan characters other than Spock, it does a great job at introducing Vulcan culture. It's an incredibly important episode to show us what the actual planet of Spock looks like. This was made due to the fact that producers really wanted to see more about Spock, clearly showing that he was the more popular character. This was originally going to be made in the first season, but they were too busy making Shore Leave in order for this to be made. Introducing lots about Vulcan culture, including the very, main important thing everyone knows, mostly about Star Trek in general, which is the Vulcan salute and the whole live long and prosper thing. And we even see important Vulcan characters that we see who exactly is part of the leadership, like T'Pau. For those long and deep fans of Star Trek, it's really cool to see all this stuff introduced and to also compare it to other appearances of these characters before and after. We never really know what happens to T'Pring after this. She does go with Stan after this, played by Lawrence Montague, who was going to be a guy who was going to maybe replace Leonard Nimoy if Leonard Nimoy didn't agree to come back to the second season. Which, could you imagine Spock just being played by a different guy now? Maybe he would have been fine. I don't know. He never says a single thing in both of the times he appears. And Spock is just kind of too iconic with him being Leonard Nimoy, so I don't think it would have worked out. Amok Time, must watch for Star Trek fans. If you haven't already watched Amok Time, absolutely do. There really is only one problem with it, and the fact that it's called Amok Time. It doesn't even involve time travel or anything. It's the only not time travel episode that has the word time in it. Why is it called that? Who mourns for Adonis? It's spelled that way, but it's pronounced Adonis. It's specifically taken from Adonis, an elegy of the death of John Keats by Percy Bysshe, Shelly, Scotty's trying to get with Lieutenant Palmas on the bridge while Kirk and McCoy are like, look at this guy. The Enterprise is stopped near Pollux 4 where a giant green hand made of energy stops them in one of the weirdest and most memorable moments of the series because, what? They try to get free of the hand, but instead they decide to kind of just go on down. Kirk, Scotty, McCoy, Chekhov, and Palmas, who by the way is an archaeologist, anthropologist, and a person who has studied ancient civilizations, so very good for this job, I guess. They meet Apollo, who is a humanoid figure who is filled with such strange space energies that it can do things. His species believes themselves to be gods because they nearly are. They're incredibly strong and are in fact the inspiration for Greek gods on Earth. He believes that due to that they are kind of his children and they will stay there and praise him as a god. He's the only one still around because the rest of them have just kind of went to become energy space farts somewhere else, and he needs to go and do the same. Trying their best to get out of which they're stopped at all points by Adonis, who just kind of really knows what's going on. The only time he's distracted is when he's with Palmas. Palmas is perfectly fine with this too. She is super into him. After reminding her of her duty, they do use her to basically break up with him and make him so mad that they're able to distract him. Using a specific version of the beam, they're able to get through the force field he's set up so they could destroy the main thing, kind of like allowing his power to work properly. And with him having already utilized all of his power by getting mad, and he basically now no longer has a way to keep it all together, and then fades into presumably either dust or becoming a similar space fart, maybe in some kind of weird other continuum of some capacity. Not Q, but like B, A, I don't know. They never really fully follow up with the fact that Scotty was super into this character, but they did almost have Palmas like pregnant by Apollo, and they would have been like, well, now what do we have to do? If they thankfully didn't go with that angle, because that would have been weird. That would have been so weird. I should note the actress, Leslie Parrish, would wear the exact same dress made by Bill Theiss in another Paramount show later on next year titled Mannix in the episode The Girl in the Frame. If I can find footage of that, then it will be on screen, but if not, then here I am. God knows I can't find footage for every 60s show that exists. Either way, this episode, just kind of whatever, right? I don't really care too much for the big gods threatening the main characters and judging them type episodes. There's a bit too many of them in TOS. But this one, it's fine. I think Apollo is pretty entertaining. And he's definitely acted very well. I think Michael Forrest gives a great performance as the character, as he should, because he is a regular performer in over 75 television shows throughout the 50s and 60s. This one's a fun one, and definitely one of those that like everyone really thinks about when they think of Star Trek, mostly with that big-ass green hand, right? The idea that there is this species of like very strong beings that can move and control energy in such a way that are like nearly the strength of gods is a very interesting idea in the series. Too bad all of them are essentially gone from existence, except apparently their descendants, which do canonically exist and aren't as strong, but do have a mild ability to control energy around them. We've established that essentially most species have some capacity of PSI in some way, and if some are exposed to certain energies, they can get strong enough. So, you know, maybe eventually the Greek gods species will come back in some way. Next up is the Dudley years. Some episodes just aren't winners, so we just, you know, we don't gotta talk about all of them in such depth. You know, old disease. It's about old disease. They go down and they find people who have died of death of being old, and they start getting old, and the makeup so bad. Chekhov isn't affected, and they're not sure why. Maybe it's because he's Russian? Who knows? Turns out it's because he was a big, stinky, scaredy baby when he like ran from the old death people, and turns out just like adrenaline will stop the effects, and it's like, what? Okay, sure. More important thing is that because the Romulans were showing up, they needed to unoldify the characters, and there's a nice little reference of the Corbomite maneuver that apparently hadn't been used on the Romulans yet, so they could just use that for the off-screen Romulans. But that sounds way more interesting of something than old people disease. No episode, skip it. Friday's Child. Friday's Child is another time where the Enterprise is sent to a place specifically to make peace with some new people, mostly to make, you know, dilithium. Dilithium, the big crystal that actively fuels the Enterprise and many ships in the series, is a very wanted source of energy. So the planets that happen to have dilithium always end up being the most complicated planets with some big problem on it. Presumably there are other planets that have dilithium that like aren't filled with something that would cause a plot to happen, but this one is certainly not one of them. It's one of the ones that has some people that really don't want them on there because it's always inhabited by the most annoying fucking people. Dr. McCoy apparently had been to Capella 4 before, at a point that is incredibly unclear because we do actually see that flashback and we see him in the TOS outfit, so I guess he was there in the middle of season 1. Maybe that's why he wasn't there for certain episodes. Who knows? They're immediately attacked by the Compellans, a group led by Mab, who is working with a Klingon cross. They didn't realize the Klingons were here until right now, and apparently the Klingons don't realize they're there until right now, so cool, I guess. Both of them try to make their appeal on to get the mining rights, and nothing really happens until, of course, a group attacks the main camp with the leader of the Compellans, of which the Federation is blamed for. The Federation takes the wife of the leader of the 10 tribes of Capella. She's incredibly annoying and she is pregnant, so they have to take care of both her and her eventual baby, of which she does give birth to. You'd think this would be a very bad episode due to how much I'm describing these new aliens as being very annoying. It, however, isn't, because oddly, she has a bit of a thing for McCoy, and he's the only person that she's fine with ever being around her, and I oddly find this kind of cute. They are able to fight against the Capellans by using bows and arrows. And due to the odd structure of the culture of the Capellans, the main bad Capellan is essentially compelled to have himself get killed just so that they could then have his men turn on the Klingons, and so the Federation can now have mining rights. By the way, that baby named after McCoy. The Capellans are just sort of people, and I'd imagine why they have horse-like hair, because they all have big-ass ponytails, so maybe there's something else going on with their physiology or something that makes them more than just also people. I don't know, I'm just kind of making stuff up. The Capellans were given boots to make them taller, so maybe they have hooves, you know? If I had to redesign them, they'd be Minotaur dudes or something of the sort, right? But really they just are people, and you can barely tell that they're actually taller for most scenes. It's never really as important. I forgot till writing the script for this, so there's that. Eileen's alright. She's played by Julie Newmar, who, if you don't know, is Catwoman from 60s Batman, so she gives a pretty great performance as this understandably annoying character. And thankfully, the episode didn't end with her just up and dying the same way that the original writer wanted it to be. Kind of one of those times where the constant rewrites, which, by the way, Gene Roddenberry is still doing with every episode, complicating the production, was a good thing. Episode, them on the run and them trying to survive up in the mountains, of course filmed at the Vasquez Rock, so you can tell that it's the same place that Kirk fought the Gorn. The episode, despite how odd the culture of the Capellans are, is actually not that bad of an episode. I don't mind the Friday's Child episode. I found it actually kind of entertaining, right? You really, to enjoy this cute little relationship between McCoy and Eileen. I don't mind the two of them, right? You really get to see there's a better side to this character, and I think it's a good way to really show this species that when you first meet them, you're not sure about them. You see that they are full of people that do care about each other and have more to them than the very baseline weird alien thing that this show does like to have every alien species have. Next up is the Changeling. I don't know why it's called this, because though technically this is about a space probe that was sent out many years even before Enterprise, but it eventually merged with another alien probe, and now it has a weird mixing of its two ideas. It was created by a guy named Roy Kirk, so when Kirk says his name, the Changeling believes that it is its creator. And they find out a little bit more about it through Spock supposedly mind-melding with it, even though it is a robot, and I don't think it should work like that, but okay. Called Nomad, its mission is supposedly non-hostile, but ultimately we figure out that it likes absolutely killing people or messing them up. Scotty gets killed by it, just actually killed. He gets brought back to life, which makes you wonder, is there a human soul in Star Trek? Is that really the same Scotty in the series going forward? Or is that some kind of shell with some fake idea of who Scotty is within him? Uhura gets her mind wiped and forgets how to speak English or who she is. She is apparently re-taught all of that stuff later. Presumably, not everything was fully erased? Unclear. It's cool that she did speak Swahili, which was established to be her, original language, so that's kind of neat to hear. Kirk, as he does, outspeaks the robot and makes it explode by going, "You can't kill your creator, but your creator's a human. You gotta kill humans, but I'm a human. You can't kill your creator. Kirk is shown to be a smart guy, but like the fact that he could outspeak like a super evil computer is always weird when he constantly does it multiple times. The Changeling's an alright episode. The Changeling as an episode, it's fine. I think Nomad's pretty fun. He's also voiced by Scotty, which is kind of funny. But like as an episode, I don't think it really does too much, right? It's very clearly meant to be like, well, we do have a limited budget, so we gotta have something set mostly on the Enterprise. While Nomad does show itself as a believable threat, it's then, out thought by Kirk again, which makes it no different than any other evil robot or computer in the series. Wolf in the Fold, another one that I think you could probably skip over, so we're not going to go into too much detail. Again, there's a lot of episodes in this season. Scotty is suspected of killing several women while he's on leave in Argelius 2. He's on medical leave here because apparently a serious head injury was caused by a female coworker, and he now suddenly has a, quote, total resentment towards women. That's such a weird thing to hear from Scotty. Does he have a resentment towards robots after getting murdered by one? Due to this, they fully believe it when not only is he found near a dead lady, but also his prints are found on the body. Eventually, they figure out by looking into the history of not just this planet, but also nearby planets in a odd trajectory that there is apparently a murderous space fart who has traveled from planet to planet and essentially like deals with its hunger by taking over someone and making them a murderer. Apparently, they're the reason for Jack the Ripper a long time ago, which, sure, okay. I do think it sets its mood very right in terms of being this kind of spooky mystery, but it never really finds itself at being an interesting actual mystery. It suddenly being revealed to be a space fart that possesses people genuinely came out of fucking nowhere and ended up being a lot less interesting than an actual whodunit. Had this been a genuine whodunit, which the series had done and will do later, without it being suddenly a weird new entity, would have been a lot more interesting, because the first third, fourth of this episode isn't that bad. The rest of it is just stupid. Whatever, Scotty is found innocent, and presumably he goes back to liking women after this. Obsession. Did someone say space fart? Well, how about vampire space fart? Surveying Argus 6. One of them soon reveals that they had found some kind of scan for dicornium. Kirk starts freaking out when he hears that and goes to fire on any weird gaseous cloud that may show up. That, of course, does happen. It does attack several of them, and several of them die when it apparently sucked out all of their blood. Not just their blood, but their red blood cells specifically. Ooh. It turns out that this space fart had actually totally murdered most of the people on Kirk's old ship, whose captain was Ensign Garrovik's father. Though at first Garrovik seems to have no desire to try and fight this thing, he eventually does work with Kirk to basically bring in the big vampiric space fart and destroy it before it can continue destroying things. Attacking the murderer of a lot of the people of the Farragut is essentially Kirk's big Moby Dick thing that he's constantly been trying to find this thing for years, thus the reason why it's called Obsession. You really see a different side to Kirk in this. You see that Kirk is an imperfect person who has the same amount of faults that other people who are other captains have also had. That Kirk has his own interests outside of being a captain, like finding a big vampiric space fart. The episode is very fun. It's not as one-to-one Moby Dick as a later episode, but you can really indeed see the actual thing here. I do like expanding onto these characters in such a way of giving us more backstory of them and what other ships they were on and what else happened on them and how that has affected them here. You see why he is as protective as he is and why he leads the way he is because of how much he had messed up in not killing the big space fart with the cannons, and his hesitation led to the death of most of the people on the Farragut. He had blamed himself for years, and I think that really builds Kirk as a character. Showing that he has had these failures is why he believes that he needs to take that chance to save everyone. This episode also does show Eddie Paskey's character Leslie, who appears in a whole bunch of episodes. Probably the most recurring background character. I want to put a spotlight on all the recurring background characters when we get to the animated series later, just to have more time to do it. But Leslie's a notable character. He's one of the actual named ones and appears a whole bunch of times, especially going to these planets. And it sucks to see him die here. He will return in later season 2 and season 3, so presumably he was actually fine and they just thought he died, or he somehow came back in between episodes. Hey, this is Star Trek. There has been times where dead people have come back to life, so presumably some weird shit happened in an unseen episode that brought Leslie back. I like Obsession. I think it's a definite recommend from me, at least. It's not necessarily an important episode, but I think it really adds a lot to the main captain of the Enterprise when you really go into his backstory. This also establishes the Farragon as the ship he was right before the Enterprise, which will have a few appearances in later Star Trek stuff. The Apple. I hate the Apple. In the Apple, they get to this very peaceful-looking planet. Chekhov thinks it's like Russia. If only he knew how exactly like Russia it would actually end up being. It's the annoying orange planet, a planet filled with annoying orange people who apparently all love a big snake robot known as Val, who basically stops them from having sex the way they want them to, and to make them give him brutes, I guess. Once the Enterprise crew starts teaching them about new concepts like love and stuff, Val starts going, I'm gonna teach you about murder, kill them! Spock warns Kirk and the others that interfering with all of this will indeed interfere with the Prime Directive, and that even if something is interfering with another species, that it has now incorporated itself in its populace, so that's gonna be a problem. And yeah, maybe you should like totally destroy the things that are currently controlling another species. Yes, absolutely. But considering the fact that these people have basically been like changed by this thing, it's now like different than just an oppressor. But indeed, Kirk decides to kind of just mess with it. Kirk once again is able to outspeak himself against a computer, but instead of destroying it that way, he's able to confuse it, distract it, so they can blow it up. This episode has probably like one of the most like red shirt death counters because they kind of all get murdered in this one. And man, wish that was me. The Apple is annoying. I hate it. I hate the makeup. I hate these dumbass orange dudes. Val looks pretty cool though. Big snake things are pretty cool, but you can have cool big snake things in something that isn't annoying. It's essentially Return of the Archons, but less interesting. It's verbatim the same plot of, oh, what's that weird magic thing? No, it's a big computer. Whoa. This is unfortunately the one planet I want to see in a future Star Trek thing, because I wonder what happens to these guys. Did their society change or like grow after this? I'm kind of interested in learning what happens to these guys afterwards. Does Val end up still being like some kind of thing that's utilized by people later? By like some kind of myth that they still believe is still around? Or is it like something else is like takes its place as the mythology of this species? This could be a lot more interesting when you add to it. The idea is there, but the Apple's boring. Hell, it's not even like as good of like an Eden comparison. It's just a nice looking planet. La-di-do, whatever. Mirror, mirror. This is one of those like quintessential episodes that essentially will be incredibly important towards just a thing that will appear multiple times in this series, the Mirror World, or as I'm going to call it, Bad World. While transporting, they accidentally cross the barrier to the Mirror World, or Evil World, and the Terran Empire is what the Federation is instead. Kirk is evil and Spock is his henchman. Everything is essentially happening in a similar, if not the same way, but evil. Bad World version of the Enterprise was doing the same thing that Good World version of the Enterprise was doing, which is try to get more dilithium from the Halkans. And while Good Enterprise was able to get it from the Halkans, Bad Enterprise was just going to take it from them. So now Kirk and Crew have to find a way to get off the thing before the Enterprise realizes that they're not done blowing up the Halkans and taking all their dilithium. Mostly Bad Sulu and Bad Chekhov. Bad Sulu is this really kind of like fun character. I like Bad Sulu. He's just like this conniving evil man with a big scar, and he's constantly trying to mac up with Uhura. Bad Chekhov keeps to try to expose them, but eventually he's shoved in the box that causes you pain. No, not the box that causes you pain. Kirk has a girlfriend who's like, in the main universe, one of his like regular employees, so he's a little bit weirded out. But what distracts him is the like box that kills people. People aren't shoved into it. You just like dial on them, you're watching them through some kind of TV, and you just press a button and they're gone, which is horrifying. Supposedly it was taken from an alien, God knows who, or if it exists in the main universe, but probably not. Spock, through mind melding, is able to figure out from McCoy about the exact origins of the people that he's clearly suspicious of, and does allow them to escape, even though Kirk's girlfriend does try and stop them. Spock supposedly, because Kirk told him to, does try to utilize this situation to try and turn around how the Terran Empire will work, and we'll eventually find out how that eventually goes about. So it does leave us with a little bit of like a hopeful conclusion of even such a bad place like this has a hope. So our world certainly has as much hope. If a bad place like this can turn around, so can we. And I like that as an idea. Anyway, that'll be immediately thrown out thanks to Deep Space Nine, but we'll get to that way later. An incredibly enjoyable time throughout. Mirror Mirror is a great episode. I think it's obviously one of those you have to recommend to new Star Trek fans and to rewatch if you have already seen TOS. It's one of the most interesting ones in terms of concept, and it executes it incredibly well. The bad universe, bad world does a very good job establishing itself in how different it is compared to the Federation. It could have made it really easy, but in how they change it in the very subtle ways that they do, it really feels like a different world. You know, it's not some weird smiled shift that really just feels like the same place. This is a whole different universe and with its whole own history, and it's always cool to see it come back. It's one of my favorite tropes in Star Trek, and though some people believe it's overused, and maybe, but I always like seeing it. I like seeing bad versions of the good characters just doing like cartoonishly bad things. The Mirror Universe is fun. Journey to Babel! The crew picks up the ambassador from Vulcan to add to the apparently 114 ambassadors and other similar types of people to go to the Babel conference, a very important conference that happens at some point to essentially bring in a planet to the Federation. How often they have it or what exactly it means, unclear, but they go to a neutral planet called Babel to go there. Things begin to go awry. Firstly, the Vulcan ambassador is quickly introduced as Spock's father. They don't have that great of a relationship, and we begin to explore the father-son relationship between Spock and Sarek, and also more importantly, Sarek's human wife. We get to hear from them more about young Spock and the fact that he did have problems mastering being a Vulcan in Vulcan culture due to his half-human nature, and his father has a very complicated feeling towards the way Spock is, but also more importantly, his joining of Starfleet. It's this episode that finally connects them as father and son, as they really do begin to connect as a family, as Sarek begins to really reconcile with the fact that his son did join Starfleet. It's the more interesting part of this episode, as Spock soon has to deal with the fact that his dad might be dying, and that he can't really, be there to give something that he needs in surgery, because obviously he needs to deal with the fact that the A-plot or B-plot, unclear, is them being attacked by an unknown ship. Spock obviously eventually goes, it's fine, and then does go to actually help out his dad, while Kirk and the rest of the crew are able to figure out what exactly is happening. Not just in terms of who exactly is attacking this ship, but also who's trying to kill the other delegates, and who this spy worked for. An Andorian, which by the way is the blue guys with the weird antennas, reveals himself to not be an Andorian, but a spy who's trying to mess up the whole Babel conference, for reasons that we'll get to in a second. Eventually they're able to throw that ship for a runaround, and afterwards they're able to figure out that it's part of the Orion Syndicate, who just wanted stuff from the actual planet of Babel. And this guy was an Orion pretending to be an Andorian, which makes sense. Actual Andorians are way stronger and aren't defeated by an ass-first attack. That's actually how Kirk fights the guy. Maybe that is the way to defeat Andorians. Just throw your ass at their face and they'll be incredibly confused. This episode is great for a few reasons. It establishes other members of the Federation and that it's filled with a lot more than just more human type things. It establishes that Vulcan is indeed part of it and the exact relationship towards it and the Federation, which will definitely be in more detail later installments, and also of course brings us Spock's parents, incredibly important characters to both the mythos and Spock as a character. Really does add more to him as much as it did in Amok Time. I think this and Amok Time are probably the two best episodes of this season just for what they do for the character, as they really do not just add to him, but also Vulcan as a people. It also sows the seeds to what will be all of the important characters and plot points of decades later being brought together in the establishment of the Federation in Star Trek Enterprise, which is very fun to look at after having watched that. Plus, with that show's context going into this, if you decide to do it that way, which would be strange, but sure, having the Orion Syndicate be involved is also kind of funny. Leonard Nimoy did have to help Mark Lenard and Jane Wyatt learn a little bit more about the established Vulcan culture from previous episodes, which does allow them to really feel natural in their roles. And Mark Lenard, being a consummate professional, does a great job at being a Vulcan. It's a subtle episode, it's more of a mystery episode, it's not like it has a lot of action to it, but it certainly has that for those who care about that. Weird aliens, cool Star Trek stuff, it's everything you kind of want from a Star Trek episode. It's, again, probably the best or second best episode of this season. Bread and circuses, coming from the Latin saying, mostly talking about the practice in ancient Rome of providing a regular free bread dole to the lower classes and free entertainment to the city's arenas, both of which to lessen the effect of civil unrest in the populace, adds to the whole point of this episode, a very important idea of the fact that entertainment is often used to distract people from the actual important things going on. It is broadcasting certain things to them. They're currently looking for a man who had gone missing a long time ago on this planet. They ultimately meet a group called the Chapter of the Sun, who are runaway slaves and don't want to be killed under the gladiators. They see the man that they're looking for, Captain Merrick, is apparently mentioned to be the first citizen, Mericus. They believe he's responsible for the changes in this society, but as they're soon captured by the police of this world and then soon sent to nearly get killed on TV, they find out that they just naturally are like Rome. They're a Rome-like planet who did establish their own version of television. Now, Mericus didn't help with this whole thing, but Mericus is not responsible for it being this way. He is responsible, however, for being lured in and allowing the entirety of his people to come on down from the ship and get killed. Everyone from his ship got killed due to all of the schmoozing that he was distracted with, and he thought this world would be perfectly fine, but eventually they were all sent to be killed live on television. Whenever Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are able to not get killed the first time, they're allowed to continue. And Kirk is nearly tempted to do the same. And you would have thought that sexy lady would have definitely tempted Kirk, and I'm sure it almost did, but Kirk is thankfully a lot better than that. He's the one who does the seducing, and due to that, they are sent to death. They're able to stall enough so that the ship can lock onto them and get them out of there, and the only way they fully can is with Merrick to sacrifice himself. With the crew wondering, isn't that strange that they, as a people, were able to essentially make their own version of Rome, but that as Rome did on Earth, their empire will probably eventually fall as well. Or it won't, and we just have a Rome planet for forever that likes weird television. The caves, oddly enough, are a part of a cave system that is directly under the Hollywood sign and is one of the most used sets in all of Hollywood, especially during this time. Mostly used as the Batcave. Several of the costumes were also reusing from other productions, the Sign of the Cross, Cleopatra, and the Crusades, and all of it does give this at least genuine feel of feeling like a Rome-like planet. With that being said, I think the idea of this episode as the importance of dealing and understanding not just propaganda, but people's opinions on it and how they react to it and how governments will often use media to distract people, it doesn't really do that good of a job at establishing an actual point with it all, right? And P.S., another example of Star Trek has always been woke, because that is the whole point of this episode, right? Of that people, even till now, will just refuse what they see and will get easily riled up by anything, and it will allow them to be distracted by what's actually important and will lie to themselves if it goes against any of their values. But they don't go too far into it, and if they just went more with it and more like actually political with it, it would have been a lot more interesting as an episode and as a topic, but they just don't go as far as they could have. You could really go into more detail in terms of how exactly media and propaganda affect people and how it really makes them believe what the people in charge of that want them to believe, and why this sort of thing can make them be perfectly fine with someone getting killed on live TV. To which I mean, that already exists. It's called The Running Man. So yeah, watch that instead. Next up is the Doomsday Machine. After getting a distress call, they find a ship bashed and broken, which of course is the USS Constellation, a very similar ship to the USS Enterprise. The only survivor within it is Matt Decker. They find him absolutely so messed up, and the only thing they can figure out is through his logs. While they fart. While they start figuring that out, Matt Decker comes to, and he tells them a little bit more than had happened. he found this absolutely massive destructive machine which could destroy whole planets. He had not known what exactly to do, so he decided to get everyone off, and he was the last person off. And unfortunately, that's when the big Doomsday Machine had destroyed the planet all of his crew were on. The constellation is looked at by Kirk, and with that, Commodore Matt Decker takes control of the Enterprise and essentially brings the Doomsday Machine to it. We see Matt Decker is insanely out of his mind. He is absolutely gone. Even more so than Kirk was in Obsession, he is Captain Ahab. They essentially fully have that here, right? That even more so than the previous episode is exactly what this episode is trying to be. This is Space Moby Dick. Of eventually, Matt Decker Ahab is deposed from the leadership and Spock is able to take command, stopping them from being absolutely obliterated. One of the shuttlecrafts, the Einstein, is taken by Decker, and he tries to destroy it from the inside. It ends up doing nothing, but it does give Kirk an idea of he himself will drive it into the Doomsday Machine. They're just barely able to get him off as he's driving it into the big space mouth whale cone, which does destroy it. They ultimately have no idea what this ship ended up actually being, but they are able to destroy it, stopping it from continuing to destroy any more planets. I love the Doomsday Machine. It is a horrific big-ass space cone thing, and it was cool to see it in Star Trek Online suddenly out of nowhere. One of my favorite designs from Star Trek, and yeah, out of all of the awesome ships, this is one of my favorites. I don't know why. I like the big weird ones. Take that as you will, I guess. William Wyndham gives a great performance as the absolutely out-of-his-mind Matt Decker. He genuinely is a great actor who has been in quite amount of films. He's an Emmy award-winning actor, so he'd better give a great performance. And he's a genuinely compelling character who you really do relate to because of just how desperate he is to redeem himself, and how much you really do feel like, oh my god, our crew could just die right here. Like, Kirk could just die. Obviously he won't, but like it does do a great job making you feel like that could easily have happened. It builds a tense environment that continues to build upon itself throughout the episode, and it's very fun throughout. This is an absolute recommendation. If you haven't already seen the Doomsday Machine, go ahead and watch our favorite big-ass cone that was so cool that its original designer fucking hates it. Private Little War. While on Neural, a pre-First Contact planet, Spock, Kirk, and McCoy, as it always is, go and are doing some minor research before they are nearly attacked by the Mugato. No, not the guy from Zoolander, but a big ape with a horn that apparently it jerks off in universe. That is canon. Kirk was here a long time ago, probably on the Farragon, and he tries to go and meet up with the guy he had sort of roomed with a long time ago. They are soon shot at by people, and they're very confused, not only because they're getting shot at, but also there shouldn't be guns on this planet. Spock is taken out through most of the episode. He has his own B-plot where he's being taken care of by, hey, Mbenga, a character who they were gonna make be a new recurring character, but that also ended up kind of falling through, and Nurse Chapel. It does eventually result in her smacking the shit out of him to get him to reawaken, but it's fine. Spock takes a long rest. Kirk and McCoy try to figure out what exactly happened here, and they soon find out that, of course, the friggin' Klingons are the ones in charge of giving them guns. They meet up with the guy that Kirk had roomed with a long time ago, and his crazy wife, who is, as they all are, super into Kirk. Well, that's mostly because she really wants, like, their own guns. Kirk gets, like, stabbed by the Mugato and is poisoned by them, which, sure, okay. And due to that, after a sexy dance, he's cured of it, but then mind-controlled, maybe? By her, kind of? He does give them guns, which does now result in them continuing to shoot, and after that ends up still not really helping out, Sexy Lady ends up tricking Kirk into getting his phaser, of which trying to show her own superiority with stronger weapons ends up getting her killed. After Kirk and McCoy do take care of the Klingon, thanks to the guns they've given to the other guys, they do come back, and Kirk almost decides that he's gonna give them phasers and try to take down all the other people that just killed that lady, but quickly resides in knowing that there's nothing that they can do. This is one of several times where they mention that this supposedly great, cool planet, which was pre-civilization, and like, industrialization was the real planet of Eden, and now they've introduced something on accident or on purpose, and it's made them leave Eden again. There's, you know, lots of biblical allegories that Gene likes to put in, despite being notably a man that doesn't believe in God, but sure, okay. it's clear what this is meant to reference, right? This is very clearly meant to be America and Russia giving guns to what they believe to be third world countries and having them fight because they can't fight right now. This is exactly that. This is Vietnam, this is Afghanistan, this is Korea. If you, again, don't look and realize that this series has always been, quote, woke, if you are once again that kind of person that's stupid enough to believe that the series hasn't always been political, then here you go. This episode does break the Prime Directive in a way that Kirk actively, acknowledges, and I'm sure they give a good reason to the Federation when eventually they question them later for breaking it. Kind of one of those slap on the wrists, yeah, we get it, Kirk, you've done it before type things. But it's good that they didn't, continue it, because they had realized that that was not the better idea to do, that it was never the good idea to do, and it's this great moment in the ending of it. I think this is a very fun episode. I don't think it's the greatest, I think it takes its time a little bit too long, but its message is important. It's a very beautiful episode. It was shot at the Bell Ranch, a place that separates the San Fernando Valley and Simi Valley. This beautiful looking forest that thankfully was lit very well. Also, the Klingon in this one is the one that looks the most Klingon, at least when compared to later Klingons. He also apparently is the guy in Star Trek V, at least according to its novelization. This one, not the greatest episode of all time, but it is one that I do recommend for some people. I think it can be very enjoyable, especially if you're a fan of the Klingons, because any episode with Klingons is entertaining, even if they are in barely any of it. Going through this one very quickly too, because it's not that big of a fan of it. Immunity syndrome. While trying to get some shore leave, they get a call from Starbase 6, which has basically been destroyed by a big old space thing. It's not a space fart. They try to go into it, try to study it. Spock nearly dies doing so. And they figure out it's a big space amoeba, and it's about to separate itself in a mitosis type thing. And it will basically obliterate all of space if it keeps doing that. So they better kill it. They sure do that. I don't like the immunity syndrome. It's one of those really boring, easily skippable ones that adds nothing to nobody and has nothing to say. It's a big old space monster that we blow up at the end. Nothing said about it even. We don't even mourn the death of a creature that we needed to kill, right? Because it's a big space amoeba. It's like a germ in the fucking galaxy, right? It was gonna destroy everything if it continued to exist. There's no debate on that. Nor should there have been. But what was the point? A piece of the action. The USS Enterprise arrives at Sigma Iota 2, a remote planet which had been visited by the Horizon back in 2168, sometime a little bit after the events of the Enterprise show, when ships had balls on the front. The Horizon was lost shortly after leaving Sigma Iota 2, and Starfleet managed to just now receive their radio reports a century later. As the Enterprise gets there, they're contacted by their leader, who says that he's the boss and will send a reception committee to them. We soon find out that they're guys with Tommy guns. They're brought to the office of this guy who is not just the boss, but a boss, and there's turned out there is several bosses, all of which go by this rule book, which is known as The Book, which is a book made in 1992 called Chicago Mobs of the 20s. They basically built their whole society around stereotypical mobsters from the 1920s, and considering this book doesn't actually exist, it's clear that it was bad and gave them a bad interpretation of what mobsters were actually like. They're not like actual mobsters, of which are a lot more ruthless and, bad, but they're more like, "Nyeh See, I'm gonna get you with my Tommy guns, nyeh." The boss wants them to give them, quote, heaters, which is guns. They refuse, so the boss gives them 8 hours to provide the weapons or die, but soon enough, Kirk gets captured again by a separate gangster, and now they're stuck in the middle of a gang war. After basically dressing up as them, looking all snazzy, they're able to trick all of them together and trick them into believing that they are now forced into a syndicate, or else the Enterprise, with their heaters, will take them, forcing them to work together and giving the Federation 40% of all dealings that they have. Buck does wonder what exactly, they're going to do with that money, considering that the Federation doesn't really have money, but he promises that they're going to use that money to kind of go back into the development of the people on this planet. In the Deep Space Nine episode that would eventually be turned into Trials and Tribulations, they were going to go back to this planet and find them all dressed up like the TOS crew. I should also note Travis Mayweather, while he was on the ECS Horizon, does have the exact book that was found here, so who knows, maybe Captain Mayweather was one of the people that accidentally left all of what remained of them before their ship exploding on this planet, and he's responsible for them all acting like this. Thanks, Travis. This episode, perfectly fine. I really enjoy it. It's really fun. I love its odd interpretation of 1920s gangsters, and it's fun to see these characters interact with them. It's not as interesting as a time travel episode, but it is a good way to show these guys in this like fish out of water type feel of a whole different feeling era that doesn't necessarily need to feel like weird alien thing. It's odd that this isn't the only time this season that we have a planet that happens to feel a lot like something that is a part of human culture. We just saw one, we'll see two later, but, you know, this one is probably the only really good one. Patterns of Force. Remember what I said about we'll see it soon afterwards? Well, the USS Enterprise is, as they were, going to a different planet to see what's up with it. Planet Echos is apparently where the missing teacher, Dr. John Gill, a man who all three of our main characters all look up to in some capacity, they find that Planet Echos is currently capable of nukes as they get hit by a nuke from the planet. They should not have this, and they soon go down and find out that Dr. John Gill has messed with their society. He is apparently their Führer and has made the world like Nazi Germany. Oopsie! They're given emergency transponders, which are never used in the entirety of the rest of ever again, just in case they cannot get to their communicators. They soon have to dress up like Nazis and pretend to be Nazis, but are soon found out to not be Nazis. After getting captured, they use their weird gem things in their bodies to make a fake laser so they can get out of there. They soon find an underground group of people who are trying to fight against them, one of which is the girl that's actually in charge of making the propaganda, oddly. And they find that there's going to be a big meeting of all of the big generals, and they're going to try to get in the middle of that. They get McCoy in the middle of the situation, who does a great job at being just a goofy man all of the time, and through that he's the distraction so that they can get into the main area where John Gill is, finding out that he has been a figurehead being forced to make these speeches while being drugged throughout all of this time. After being mind melded, he gets undrugged enough to basically say that, hey, the guy who's my main general has been doing this shit to me for a long time, and I haven't even been in charge this whole time. All this is a bullshit bunch of lies. That guy does get taken down, and they leave the planet hoping that the society won't continue to be Nazis, but considering that Nazism is a very hard line to fucking go down, it's probably going to be a lot harder for them to figure out how to not do that. As someone who's also into history, I will say that this episode sucks. Writer John Meredith Lucas wrote this episode due to his fascination of the functioning totalitarian regimes of societies like Nazi Germany. It is specifically his idea that comes out of the fucking mouth of Dr. Gill of, well, you have to admit they did a pretty good job leading when they forced everyone to do what they wanted them to do, and they had a pretty strong structure of leadership, even though in real life, they were filled with a whole bunch of people that could never get along and were always constantly trying to kill each other and one-up each other. If anyone ever tells me that there was some kind of structural stability to them and that, well, if they weren't evil, then they would be good, then you're a fucking moron. I don't know what to tell you, but if you tell me that there was any positive side to Nazi Germany, then there might be something wrong with you, which you have to figure out for yourself, because, excuse me, I know, as someone who is very interested in history and who has went down the line of learning about people who were in charge of bad movements as to why they were the way that they were, that I know that they were led by a bunch of dumb, sniveling assholes that couldn't get along with each other, and they were literally within reach of imploding at any moment, and that it's not a surprise that they lost. I'll note, it's funny that the Pyramid Office itself was used as the Nazi headquarters. That is very ironic. After a random guy named Norman, who was working on the Enterprise without any of them ever apparently doing a background check on the guy, takes over the Enterprise, essentially threatening them they're gonna go where he wants them to go, and they're gonna bring a specific amount of people to the planet, or they're gonna blow up the Enterprise. They kind of just go with it. While starting the process of bringing everyone down to this planet, they soon find out that the person in charge of these robot guys, as this guy ends up being revealed to be, is Hardcore Fenton Mudd. That's right, from season 1. He's back and he's taking control of these androids whose origin remains unknown. Well, they apparently come from the Andromeda Galaxy. Do they have anything to do with the Kelvins in some capacity? I don't know, but they sure are here. He basically replaces all of the people on board the Enterprise with androids, not like duplicates, it's just he sends them up there and sends the people down here. Probably whatever Mud did made them slowly realize they just don't want to really care about people, so they're just going to keep them in this jail, maybe kill them, they're not sure yet. So then the crew basically takes Kirk's idea and messes with their minds. They start doing a bunch of wacky stuff, which to the robots feel completely illogical, which Spock goes, you know what, I've seen humans do a lot of illogical things, so you know, I can completely understand why they're feeling weird about it. This shuts down all of the androids and they're able to start them back up in their original programming of taking care of the planet. They leave Mud there as part of his exile because they can't bring him to jail because jail didn't work the last time they put him there. He seems fine with it until he realizes that part of his parole is being annoyed by robot versions of his wife. We actually met his ex-wife Stella in Discovery. He's firstly clearly not over her. His ship that was in his previous appearance is actually named after her, A, and B, she's actually super cool, you know? She's actually pretty nice, and Mud has clearly been taking advantage of her throughout all these years, so her being, quote, shrewd was probably just because she realized that he was taking advantage of her. This episode is fun. It isn't the best episode, it does drag a little bit, and the androids aren't all that interesting, but it's got Mud in it, and he's funny. He's more in this episode, it's less weird than the other one was, and him just having fun, just straggling along is the reason he was brought back. I absolutely love the character, and I love that the actor is the only, like, non-Federation human who's appeared in multiple episodes, you know? It's cool that they brought him back at all, and I think it makes sense. They plan on almost giving him a spin-off show, so that might have been one of the reasons they brought him back, but thankfully that fell through. I love Mud, he's a funny character, and I would have loved to have seen more of him. It sucks that we don't see him again, besides the animated series, right? And then sort of in Discovery. But, you know, as funny as that character is, doesn't need his own show. Does not need his own show. It's a very funny episode. It's a clear showing of people being wrong about the idea that Star Trek can't do comedy, because it can clearly do it very well. Though not one of the best episodes of the series, it is a very fun one. If you really enjoyed Mud before, you'll obviously enjoy him the second time. This episode does make me wonder what exactly happens to these androids. Oddly, Discovery does introduce the fact that, though not a regular thing in the galaxy, people do make robots that do look like humans. They aren't as intricate or as smart as the Sung-type androids, but androids are a regular thing before the Sung-type androids are even like made, right? The fact that androids seem to be a regular word used by people to Data and around him seems to show that they're just astounded that he is as sentient as he is, and that he's clearly a living being, rather than a robot that is used for duties or whatever you would use these robots for. The Trouble with Tribbles! This episode is one of my favorite of probably TOS in general, but especially of this season. The Tribbles are so funny. Cyrano Jones, a black market dealer, brings these goofy little creatures, which according to the people who made the show, are just sort of rolls of carpet with little mechanical toys in them so they can move around. They also look like little pom-pom balls that you could find at like Michael's or like Party City. That's right, Party City went out of business. Oh, what a bad time we live in. The Enterprise is there for Deep Space K9 as they attempt to take care of Sherman's planet, a planet that was given to the Federation because of the Organian Treaty mentioned in episode. The Klingons, led by Koloth, are also there and get right in the way. Hijinks ensue, we have fun. The Tribbles get in the middle of all this and are, despite as annoying as they are to the main crew, especially Kirk, end up being the reason why the poisoned grain is found out. All the grain that was found that was going to be transferred to Sherman's planet is eaten comically by the Tribbles, several of which end up being dead, which is how they find out that one of these Klingons had surgically changed themselves to look human, pretend to be someone who was working at the station to try and make sure that things would go wrong for the people on, quote, Sherman's planet. Who is Sherman? I have no idea. The Tribbles, almost called the Fuzzies, and also the Shaggies, Goonies, or Puffies, God knows this would have been a lot more funny if they were called the Goonies, are the best part of this episode. One of the most notable and iconic things of Star Trek in general are just goofy little puffballs that eat and immediately give birth. They're just born pregnant, which is crazy that they just can immediately do that multiple times. All they require is a little bit of food, and that's all you need. They'll constantly reproduce. During production, the scene where Kirk is buried in Tribbles, they actually have to do it 8 times, so the look of annoyance is genuine on Kirk's face, because William Shatner was so annoyed that they had to do that 8 separate times. And it works. I love this episode and how just annoyed Kirk is when he wants them off his ship. It's the best line of the series. It's got Klingons, it's got your favorite boys getting into bar fights, and it's got silly little creatures. This is what I love about the more funny, wackier episodes of TOS. And another good showing that indeed this series can do comedy well. Also, P.S. apparently 500 Tribbles were constructed for the episode, and various of them just went missing. 40 of them were taken by the guy who plays Koloth, William Campbell. The guy, the guy who played Trelane. He returns this episode because they just liked working with him so much that they wanted to give him some kind of role. This episode was one of several that were going to be written as core from season 1, but they decided against having a recurring villain, though that would have been a lot more interesting. Still, hey, he's great, so that's all that really matters. Trouble with Tribbles is a great episode, and it's followed up by another fantastic episode decades later when eventually Trials and Tribulations return to this episode. If anyone wants to do this, I really want to see an edit of both episodes, like chronologically, from the beginning of like when these events happen to the end for both episodes, and we just cut from scenes from this episode and then from Trials and Tribulations and kind of match them up exactly 1-to-1. I think that would be fun. Not just the whole, this scene happens during this scene, but like we cut from where Kirk was to where he'll be during when the DS9 crew see him, sort of thing, you know? Now, before I mentioned a race called the Kelvins, that's because they're in this episode. By any other name, that of course is another Shakespeare reference. Kirk and the crew land after finding a distress call, which ends up being some guys with some weird belts. They're like, who are you? And they're like, we are the Kelvins. We are from the Andromeda Galaxy, and we kind of got messed up after we went through that barrier, the one from the first ever episode with the space stuff. It kind of messed us up a bit, so we're gonna need your ship to get through it again so we could bring a whole armada back from Andromeda and take over your galaxy, because our galaxy's dying. They're not able to do anything because their belts turn people into rocks, which the notable part is that they, rockify 2 of the other members of the crew that beams down with our main 3, but oddly enough, they don't crush the dude, they crush the woman, so there's no one to mac on Kirk. Except, of course, the woman Kelvin, which is exactly what happens. After, from a distance, mind melding with one of them, Spock is able to figure out that they're not actually in these bodies, they weren't originally. There were probably something like a space fart that are now inhabiting these human-like bodies, and they probably can't leave them. So Kirk decides, let's show them how to be human. After rockifying the rest of the supposedly non-essential crew, Kirk, McCoy, Spock, and Scotty basically show them how to be humans. Kirk starts kissing, Scotty starts drinking with one of them, McCoy starts drugging the other one, and Spock, oddly enough, starts pissing off the other one, mostly by beating his ass in chess. After showing him how great it can be to be human, they basically decide, you know what, we'll stay as humans and live on here. God knows what happens to the Kelvins from the Andromeda Galaxy, but considering how long it takes them to get to there, they probably, never got the message. I don't find this episode all that interesting. I find the Kelvins very generic aliens. Their weird belts that turn you into rocks, I think, is pretty scary, right? That's a crazy technology, and I'm surprised wasn't, attempted again, probably because of how inhumane it was. I imagine the Kelvins just broke it and were like, no, you can't use that. We're not going to let you use it. But presumably the Kelvin just, live as regular humans then going forward, and there's probably, people on, the Enterprise D or E that are, descendants that are I'm Kelvin. I got a little bit of energy inside me. Yeah, I got the secret for the belt, but I'm not gonna share it. And considering most of it is with an empty Enterprise, with them meeting with these guys I don't care too much about, and they never really give me much of a reason to care about, it ends up really just feeling like, all right, get onto the plot now, move along, and it ends up never really doing that. And I'm not a big fan of By Any Other Name, honestly. I could care less about the Kelvins or any explanation of whatever happens to them, besides in a guidebook or something. The Ultimate Computer. The Enterprise is used to test a new tactical computer called the M5 Multitronic Unit made by Richard Daystrom. The M5 will have some simulated attacks against Robert Wesley commanding the Lexington. Oh, I see what they did there, Wesley. M5 does pretty well to what finds a weird little smaller ship which it decides to start attacking, and it suddenly starts forgetting the fact that all this was meant to be simulations. We can't trust AI, can we? Eventually, Daystrom is able to convince its own computer that it just committed murder, and that's a bad thing, which allows them to have its defenses get shut down so they can shut it down. Daystrom is then sent to an insane asylum of space, which again raises questions. for the whole utopian society, but whatever. The M5 did kill a whole ship full of people while 5 whole separate ships were about to destroy the Enterprise because it stopped the Enterprise from telling people that a robot took over control. So our favorite boys were nearly destroyed by these other ships because of the dumbass computer. So presumably there was never an M6, and they never did this ever again. Anyway, I'm going to show you 3 separate times that in the future, Starfleet didn't learn from this situation. Mathematician Lawrence N. Wolfe wrote the original story for this episode, which was based on his interest in computers. And it was written first and then especially rewritten to be a commentary on the whole American jobs being lost to computers and new mechanized robotics that were beginning to be developed throughout the years. This episode, I think, gives a very great example on the oddities of trusting and utilizing computers and AI learning technology. And every generation, we have a new group of people who are scared about computers. It's understandable. Mechanizing things and automizing things is scary. The fact that we could trust something that doesn't feel and just goes on algorithms is a scary thing to understand. But as robotics have assisted us in developing things and creating things, we have been able to find ways to not only have it be helpful, but also work alongside human workers. I originally had a whole speech about how maybe the ideas of robotics and AI could be more interesting, but I'll just keep it simple because this video is already very long, so AI that can help us make things can be good as long as it's not meant to replace things. A lot of the crap you'll see online currently. That shit bad, this shit good. Side note, this is probably the best episode to really show you the difference between the remastered versions that were later shown on TV and then later re-released on DVD and are the ones you'll see wherever Star Trek will be on streaming services in the future. Both the K7 and the Woden, the ship that was blown up by M5, are entirely different things than they were initially. And they even use better versions of the nearly completely destroyed Excalibur. Thanks, modern effects, you do a lot better. While certain remasters were tried years before, it was eventually decided in the early 2000s, shortly after the end of Enterprise, that Paramount would start, basically, thanks to the 40th anniversary, remastering the original series, making whole new effects, not to change how everything looked, but to make certain beams and stuff look a little bit better, and a little bit more continuically appropriate from what stuff would later be established as, but especially changing certain matte paintings, which looked fine, to just better looking CGI areas, and especially changing up certain things so they look better than just the models that were used. Though I like the models that are used for the original series, the CGI just looks very nice, and they still use the same exact aesthetics. They do definitely make the planets look less samey, because obviously the same planet is used in a multitude of episodes. I didn't point that out either, but a lot of establishing shots, same exact planet, so they make it look a lot less apparent in the remasters. I think there's a bit of a debate on what to watch, but considering it's A, easier to get the remasters, and B, they look a lot better, it's what I prefer, to be honest. Return to Tomorrow! Another weird space thing calls our Enterprise crew children as it brings him to his planet. This one doesn't want to be called a god, though it wants to take Kirk's body. It turns out this planet essentially blew itself up so long ago that they had to shove their essences into orbs, and there's only, 3 left of them? One on the good guy side, his girlfriend, one on the bad guy side. They use some of our boys' bodies, but instead of using Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, they use Kirk, Spock, and this other lady. Anne Mulhall, an astrobiologist who's most importantly played by Diana Muldaur, who of course would later be Catherine Pulaski in Next Gen Season 2, gives a great performance here as both regular self and also mind-controlled by Orb girlfriend. Of course, the orbs say that they're going to give the bodies back real soon. Things end up going not all that well, as the orb in charge of Spock's body tries to take control of everything. He ends up even destroying the orbs after taking the orbs out of the main bodies, and using a vague psychic power, he's able to tremble the Enterprise enough so that he takes control of it. They probably could take him, to be honest, they just would also kill Spock. Spock, considering his own psychic powers, is able to put his mind inside his ex-girlfriend's body. That's right, Nurse Chapel, and she is able to trick the orb into basically letting Spock back in his body. They do the same thing they did with the, killer space fart from before and just shove him into space, but instead of blowing him up, he just kind of dies out in space. But thankfully, the good orbs actually weren't dead yet, and they were like, you know what, we should die, but first let's use the bodies to get a little smooch before we die. The weird part about these orbs is that they say that they supposedly, were the Adam and Eve in their universe, but, Star Trek establishes itself as being, real and not religion. But if we really wanted to get crazy, it could be these orbs could actually be those weird guys from TNG that reveal they, put their, DNA in a whole slew of planets so that a lot of the humanoid people of the galaxy are all their descendants. I wouldn't mind that as a merging. I don't think everything in Star Trek needs to be merged together. Like I've mentioned before, I don't mind the idea that Trelane isn't AQ, even though I think he is now established to be AQ. But he didn't need to be one, for instance, though the idea was cool, and I like the idea of connecting that. Not every psychic being needs to be a Q, right? But some things could be connected. The weird little blue guys could have created those androids. And these guys, considering we don't know their regular, humanoid forms, could have easily been those weird humanoids. So we come to the penultimate episode of the season, the last episode of season 2 that actually focuses on our main cast, the Omega Glory. The Omega Glory is an episode that has flashbanged me with its twist the 2 times that I've watched it. Here's what happens. The USS Enterprise, for the 3rd time in the season, goes to a planet that has a person who was on a ship who got lost, and when they get there, they see, uh-oh, it's not as peaceful as it probably should be. Turns out one of our Federation guys has messed with it. They're there to find Captain Ronald Tracy, who has been on the surface and has been working with the Combs against the Yangs, because he believes that this planet, which has a weird energy source around it that has kept the people alive for an incredibly long time, may be some sort of fountain of youth. They found out that a plague nearly wiped them all out, but the people on the planet have evolved to be fine with it, and they're immune to it, but that's kinda it. Kirk is able to fight Tracy and get away from the Combs, but they're soon captured by the Yangs, who, after telling them the twist I'll get into in a second, they are, through mind meld, sort of, are able to get their communicator and get the hell out of there. Now, one might wonder what the hell the twist is, and why I hate this episode so much, and why it is actively one of the worst episodes in all of TOS. Firstly, it's a bore. It's nothing happens for a good majority of it. They never really go into what this culture is, so they don't really make any of either group actually intriguing to you. So you're really just uninterested the entire time of whatever is happening with this war. They don't fully explain on why they're even fighting. The world itself isn't all that interesting, and it's just kind of whatever. They're just long-living people, so it's nothing about the planet itself that really matters, so you can't even do anything with this planet later. And then the main, villain, the whatever his name is, I just said it, I don't care, he doesn't even matter. He has nothing to him. There was at least something with a few of the other guys you met in the other times the Enterprise goes to a planet that's similar to regular Earth thing. But okay, and that's kind of it right there, is this is another planet that, similar to the Rome planet, has established itself as something that has a similar idea to what Earth has had, except it's even more stupid, because I could understand developing, video technology and developing a similar, idea of a fashion sense to an existing world, but it is the iconography that isn't there when it comes to Rome. I mean, kind of, and that's a little bit goofy in that episode, but this, oh my god, it outdoes it immensely. It's the Combs and the Yangs, which are communists and Yankees, because the Yangs believe in the American flag. They believe in America, and it's not like America was brought to them. They developed their own America. It's the stupidest twist in all of Star Trek, and I hate it every time. You don't care. You're snoozing through this episode, and it gets me every time. When I first watched this, I was like, that's the dumbest thing. And when I rewatched this not too long ago, because I'm rewatching all of this, it blew my mind again. I forgot. I was like, oh, this is the stupid episode. It got me a second time with its stupid twist. I hate it. I hate the Omega Glory. It's so dumb. I don't mind some of the weird concepts from Star Trek TOS, but this is beyond idiotic. And it's actively one of the first ideas of episodes they ever had. And you know what? You don't gotta have every episode made. You can put stuff on the drawing board and keep them there. You should have just went back and changed it because this episode needed to be thrown in the trash. During the time NBC announced that Star Trek would be renewed for a third season, something that I wish neither it or Paramount was exactly sure about. This was because they were getting ready to get rid of it, and after so many letters were sent out during the airing of the Omega Glory, actually, that they had a big announcement of, okay, we're making it, stop sending letters. This was all because of a big mail-in campaign that was started not just by Gene Roddenberry, but also Joe Trimble, who thankfully was such a big fan that she helped save Star Trek. And there's no other reason besides financial that Paramount was ready to get rid of it. Both it and NBC were like, it's not making enough money and we don't really care about it that much. There isn't some grand narrative of they didn't want to get rid of Gene's vision. It's just like, money, it wasn't making money, sweep it out. That's why it eventually would get an even worse time frame so that nobody was able to watch it when it came to season 3, and got a smaller budget so its episodes weren't as good. There are other reasons, we'll get to them in the next TOS video, but you know, it begins here on the exact show's downfall. They weren't sure while making this season if they were gonna get a season 3, so they're really trying to put it all in there, and that's probably why the Omega Glory got made at all. This being the final season of TOS wouldn't have been bad, but it would have been cool had they, you know, kept it in the same time frame and really gave it its time. Then we would have seen like an entirely other kind of show. But indeed, this would be the last time people would be able to easily watch Star Trek for a little bit. With that, season 2 would end with something that would be an attempt to allow Gene Roddenberry to make a different show. He was like, well, I'll write something to be a pilot, but they won't let me film a pilot, so I'll just film it with the money that I have from Star Trek. Using these Star Trek characters to establish why exactly we're focusing on someone else, they do the whole wrap around the sun thing and go back in time, oddly a year before the time frame that they did that the last time. 1968, they are oddly met by Gary 7, who is transporting very far away from his home base in his own kind of transporter. He tells him to leave. He's in charge of changing the timeline here, and he has to make sure that it goes exactly as it is so that humans can be where they are by the time they get to you guys. He's here to stop the launch of a nuclear missile, as the 2 agents that were sent there apparently went missing. Gary 7 is able to successfully stop this, though is, you know, nearly killed in the process, as he mostly uses his cool-ass Beta 5 computer and its circuits to cause the 3rd stage of the rocket to malfunction. The nuclear powers reassess their risk of creating a nuclear platform, and that stops the world from being destroyed, yet. In this, we're introduced to his assistant Roberta Lincoln, who was she kind of goofed her way into getting the job. Gary just found her so likable that he decided to tell her everything about where he comes from and his magic supercomputer. He also talks to his cat the whole time, played by a cat named Sambo. Gary 7's supposedly talking sassy cat Isis ends up actually being some kind of strange alien, which is actually a sexy lady, because again, made by Gene Roddenberry. Robert Lansing does a great job here. I think he gives a great performance as this very mysterious secret agent. But listen, this sure as shit isn't Star Trek. Well, lots of stories have been written about these characters to try and continue the adventures of Gary 7, because I do see this could have had some potential of being an interesting TV show, which God knows would have been its whole separate own video that I would have needed to talk about. But thankfully, it didn't get made, so I don't need to. It's such a weird episode. It's actually very bad. The idea is cool. I see the potential in it, but it's also a boring ass episode with this nothing character who gives us absolutely nothing, which is mostly this introduction to a weird group which we don't get any more information on. And more importantly, we don't ever see Kirk or Spock. They kind of help out, I guess, sort of, but not really. We focus on a whole other guy who's not all that intriguing and we get barely anything out of, and had this been made into a show, they probably would have fixed that and it would have been better, maybe, but I don't know for how long. I think it probably would have lasted longer, to be honest. Hollywood just prefers, even if it has sci-fi elements, to be more of a weird detective show and it to be more grounded and modern day, but it doesn't have that intrigue and that personality that Star Trek had, so why Gene ever thought that this was going to somehow replace Star Trek is beyond me. Other ideas that, though he wouldn't see them, would eventually be made into their own shows are a lot more interesting of concepts, because they are a lot more weird and high concept sci-fi than this, which is just secret agent with a computer. And we're already kind of seeing that on TV and would see it again on TV. It's nothing new, and it wouldn't have been anything as iconic as Star Trek. Assignment Earth goes down for me as one of the worst episodes in TOS, not the, but it's down there absolutely, because it's just so boring, and it barely involves the characters that we actually know and love. Why'd I have to watch a whole episode of not Star Trek in my Star Trek? Again, very mixed on it. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but as a Star Trek episode, it's bad. As a pilot, it's not great either. Whatever show this would have been made, I probably wouldn't have been that big of a fan of, but at least it would have been funny that it just kind of existed. Now it's just one of many times that Gene Roddenberry will attempt to get his own show off, and I will talk about that when we get to the movies. But until then, that's what we have for Season 2 of TOS. A very unfortunate ending to the season and almost of the series that doesn't even involve our Star Trek characters. And that's especially why it's as low on my ranking as it is, because this was the season finale, nearly the series finale, until it was announced that it was, renewed for at least one more season. Had this been the last episode, I would have been so pissed. With that, Season 2 comes to a close. When you average out the episodes in terms of what I rank them all as, you get kind of a better season than previous one. Some of the best of the show in general comes from Season 1, but there are some really good episodes in this Season 2. I'd say it's probably as even, but the worst episodes of the show are also pretty apparent when it comes to the previous season than this one. This season, technically, when you average it out, is a better season, but honestly, TOS, is really just episode by episode throughout all three of its seasons, really. There's good episodes in the next season, known as the worst season, which is correct, by the way, but, there is both good and bad equally for both of its first two seasons. For TOS to, as I said before, have a very low batting average when it comes to genuinely good episodes. But in the exact same way about Season 1, I think Season 2 is well worth your time if you're getting into Star Trek. Again, I'd say pick the episodes, pick the good episodes, and watch them in whatever order you really want, right? Continuity doesn't fully matter, but if you care about it, it is little hints of there. TOS Season 2 is a fun time because TOS in general is a fun time. The wacky 60s sci-fi show that was the original series is one that a lot of people fell in love with, and it captured the hearts of a lot of Americans and other people around the world eventually. Of course, it wouldn't be treated all that respectively by the people that were making it and releasing it, so Season 3 would take a bit of a downturn, not just in terms of story quality and effects quality, but also will be changed its time slot. We'll be seeing the downfall of the original series and how this franchise almost ended with a total dud next time with TOS Season 3. Until then, I've of course been the Movie-a-thoner. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any other opinions of TOS Season 1 or 2, leave that stuff in the comments, and anything else you might want me to review in the future. And most importantly, stay good, stay safe, and live long and prosper.